Welcome to Talk+Water, the podcast that takes a deep dive into the world of water with those making waves. My name is Todd Votteler, and I'm your host for Talk+Water. I'm also the editor-in-chief of Texas+Water and the Texas+Water Journal. You can sign up for Texas+Water by visiting texas+water.org, and you can sign up for the Texas+Water Journal at texas.waterjournal.org. Both publications are free. This is a special episode of Talk+Water today. We're talking with Michael J. McGuire, who for his entire career has worked for drinking water utilities or consulting engineering firms that advise water utilities. He worked for the Philadelphia Water Department and the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. He has worked for consulting engineering firms for about half of his professional life. He has a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from the University of Pennsylvania and both a Master's of Science and a Ph.D. in Environmental Engineering from Drexel University. McGuire has received a number of awards, including the George Warren Fuller Award from the American Water Works Association and two other awards from the American Water Works Association, the AP Black Research Award and the Abel Wolman Award. McGuire was elected to the National Academy of Engineering for scientific contributions that have improved the safety and aesthetics of drinking water. McGuire is also a widely published author who has authored over 200 publications and co-edited 5 books, as well as other collected works. In 2013, the AWWA published his book entitled The Chlorine Revolution: Water Disinfection and the Fight to Save Lives. Michael, welcome, and thank you for being part of this special edition of Talk+Water, focused on water and wastewater during the coronavirus epidemic.
Thanks, Todd. Glad to be here.
So let's start off with a discussion about bottled water. People have been stockpiling it during the pandemic. Is there any evidence that the coronavirus is a threat to the safety of drinking water, treated drinking water?
There is no evidence at all. There are disinfection systems required for every water supply that supplies water from a river or lake, in other words, from surface water. Those regulations were put into effect in 1989. So quite some time ago. What is that? 31 years ago. And since then, all water utilities in the United States that serve water from a surface supply that would be subject to possible contamination are required to provide 99.99% removal of viruses. Now, this regulation is based upon target viruses that are relatively susceptible to chlorine. And the good news is that the coronavirus is susceptible to being killed or inactivated, as we say, by chlorine. So chlorine is a very effective disinfectant, and water utilities in Texas and every other state have to comply with this regulation, or if they don't, they have to notify their customers.
So when did chlorination begin in the United States?
Chlorination of drinking water has been effective and applied in this country ever since 1908. Before that time, it was recognized that water was the vehicle for disease in this country. Typhoid fever and cholera and other diarrheal diseases were being spread by the use of contaminated drinking water. There was very little treatment, very little, if any, treatment of these major water supplies, and people died on a regular basis from waterborne disease. In 1908, a physician by the name of Dr. John Leal started the application of chlorine to the Jersey City water supply in New Jersey. This was all part of a couple of court cases and investigations by Dr. Leal, and he had the courage to go against all of the engineering and public judgment that chemicals should not be added to water, even though folks were dying. But in 1908, he, and September 26th, in fact, he actually turned on a brand new chlorination system that was designed from scratch by the finest engineer of his time, George Warren Fuller. And that chlorination has been going on ever since in Jersey City. It was so successful that after the court case approved the use of chlorine, the use of chlorine exploded across the United States. And that's one of the reasons why we enjoy the longevity of life that we enjoy in this country, because we, in fact, conquered waterborne disease. And one of the major effectiveness agents for that is chlorine and other disinfectants.
So let's get to one of our key questions here. Can the coronavirus spread through drinking water?
There's no evidence at all that coronavirus can be spread through drinking water. As I said, there are specific requirements for coronavirus to be killed in water treatment plants before the water is then put into pipes and delivered to folks' homes. There are also requirements for an active chlorine residual to be present in the water that is delivered to people's homes. And in fact, some people don't like the taste of chlorine. In fact, some of them put in, carbon filters to remove it. But having that bit of chlorine in the water provides an extra level of protection, an extra barrier against all viruses and all pathogens. And so that's one of the very effective means that water utilities use to make sure that no viral contamination occurs in the water supply and would get to their customers. So it is indeed the multiple barrier protection against coronavirus or any other virus.
So it's clear that treated drinking water in the United States is safe during the pandemic. What about sewer systems? Is there any evidence that the coronavirus is spread through sewage?
Well, there's evidence that coronavirus can be found in sewage. This is research that literally has been coming out over the last few days. One of the ways that people can stay in touch with what's happening with all the developments is to go on social media, because a lot of the researchers are now publishing some of these initial findings. And in fact, on Twitter, if you use #water or #coronavirus, you can get a lot of information on the most up-to-date research. And in fact, they have been able to isolate the coronavirus in sewage. And some people are suggesting that technique, that analytical technique, be used for tracking how serious an outbreak of coronavirus might be in a population, in a city, for example. And the problem is that detecting viruses in water is extremely difficult. And you can imagine sewage that has all of the other contaminants and interference in the water. Picking out virus particles is extremely hard. So clinical tests, that is, tests that are used on people, detect coronavirus, for example, in much higher concentrations because the virus is produced in the body. And so it's much more easily detected. And it's usually a positive or negative test. Trying to actually count or quantify virus particles in sewage is extremely hard. So we can't use it, I think, and this is my personal opinion, we can't use it as a technique for seeing how widespread an infection might be, in my opinion. But we can use it. We can use the current tests, the clinical tests, and that can be done, fairly easily. And this is now finally rolling out across the country, and that's much more effective than trying to separate virus particles from sewage.
So it doesn't sound like there's evidence that coronavirus survives the disinfection process for drinking water or wastewater. Is that correct?
Yes, as far as we know. I'm sure there are going to be articles and research that come out in the coming months where university professors and graduate students tackle the question of what is the fate of coronavirus once it's discharged into the sewage system. We know that people shed viruses in feces, and I'm not sure about urine, but definitely feces. So we know that there's a load on the wastewater plant. We also know that the biological processes in wastewater will inactivate many pathogens, kill them or inactivate them. And then there's the final disinfection step. So the question will be, once all of that happens, are coronaviruses present in rivers and lakes? And does that pose any subsequent threat, for example, as a result of recreation or other contact with water? We don't know the answer to those questions. Some virus particles can be highly infective. And in fact, one virus particle theoretically can infect a person, one virus particle. We don't know that for sure with coronavirus, but it's the kind of thing that we pay attention to when we do these research projects and we provide advice to policymakers about control and exposure in the United States. We're at the very early stages, as you might imagine, for all of this research.
So thinking about other ways people come into contact with water, two that come to mind are pools and hot tubs. Right. Do we have any information about the potential for coronavirus to spread through pools or hot tubs?
Again, no evidence at all to this point. If pools and hot tubs are properly disinfected, they should be safe. But we just don't know. We don't know, for example, how effective some of the bromine type disinfectants that are used in hot tubs are against coronavirus. So again, that work just simply hasn't been done. It doesn't mean that people should necessarily be afraid of using pools and hot tubs. I swim every day. I'm lucky enough to have a pool in my backyard, and we keep it really clean, as you might imagine, and right. Very well chlorinated. And that's true probably for all the public pools. But the point is that there's just simply not enough research now in order to give us definitive answers. But we think because of our common and usual usage of disinfectants like chlorine, that we have made our water environment safe for people.
So not everyone is using treated drinking water from a system that's provided by a city or some other entity. Some people have well water. Is there anything that somebody should do or consider doing if they are on private wells or groundwater?
That's an excellent question. We have no indication that private wells are being contaminated with coronavirus. If there is a situation where, let's say, on a farm, if somebody has a well that's too close to their sewage disposal system, like a septic tank and a septic drain field, they know that already. And they've already undoubtedly had their water tested and found out that that's a problem. And they've made those changes. All of those changes that we have made in separation of the waste source from the drinking water source for private systems will now help protect everybody from any exposure to coronavirus. So I think there's a very, very low risk, but we haven't done any surveillance of private groundwater systems. So we will not know for sure until that work is done. But I feel confident that if private wells could be contaminated by coronavirus, then they can be contaminated by a lot of other things. And the folks on those private wells know it.
So this next question is not really your bailiwick, but it's something that I think you're able to address. Obviously, there are a lot of people who are at home, and you heard all sorts of news stories about shortages of toilet paper, and so people are flushing wipes. I guess they are called flushable wipes. They're flushing down the toilet and also flushing other things, paper towels, and et cetera. And there are sewer backups resulting from this. So how serious of an issue is this for the people who maintain our water infrastructure during a crisis like this? People, clogging up sewage systems.
It's a very serious problem. It has developed into a serious problem in this country and other Western countries that use these so-called flushable wipes. Again, if you go on social media and follow some of the wastewater utilities, they are publishing pictures fairly regularly of blockages of sewers from these types of things that are put down toilets. There should be only three things that is put down a toilet: pee, poop, and toilet paper. That's it.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Nothing else. Absolutely nothing else. Because those other kinds of things don't dissolve in water like toilet paper does. I still don't understand how flushable wipes are allowed to be used in this country because, in fact, they are not flushable. If you want,
I've wondered that too. I just, they've been causing trouble for a long time. I mean, it's years.
Several years now. I would say maybe 5 years when they first came on the market. And if anyone is curious about how this happens, you can do a little experiment at home. Take maybe 4 or 5 jars and fill them with water. And in the first one, put some toilet paper. The second one, put in just Kleenex or those kinds of tissues. In the third one, put a so-called flushable wipe. And in the fourth one, put, say, paper towel, which would really be a problem, and let them sit for a while. And I guarantee you that in a day, the toilet paper will be completely dissolved. And that's exactly how it's designed. Everything else is going to have a lot of paper residue or cloth residue, frankly. And that is what clogs sewers. And in fact, it's what clogs people's home plumbing systems. So I had a plumber come into my house a couple of months ago, and he actually said to me, "You don't use those flushable wipes, do you?" And I said, oh no. And he said, well, good, because we get called out on a lot of problems from that on people's houses. So it's a problem at people's houses, and it's certainly a problem for wastewater utility workers. And the last thing we need in a crisis like this is to give those workers a lot more work trying to unclog sewers from these kinds of products that are being flushed down the toilet.
So, Michael, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Can you give us some more suggestions about how people can find out more about coronavirus and the water system, water supply?
I'll be glad to. Unfortunately, the list is kind of small right now because we are in the very beginning of our understanding of how coronavirus occurs in water and what happens to it. In other words, what we call what's the fate of coronavirus in water supplies or wastewater. again, social media is where it's happening. This is where a lot of professors who are engaged in the kind of research that we need to answer those questions are not publishing, but providing initial indications of what they're finding. One person to follow, for example, is Chuck Haas, Haas, who is a professor at Drexel University, my alma mater. And Chuck is a very good friend, and he is, without a doubt, one of the premier researchers on disinfection of those kinds of contaminants, not only in water supplies, but also in plumbing systems. So following Chuck is a good idea, but you will also then run across a lot of other folks that are doing this kind of work. Obviously papers are going to come out, and so the usual investigations through Google and Google Books and Google Scholar will get you those kinds of information. But if a citizen really wants to know what's going on with their specific water supply, they should get out their water bill, look and see who they're paying their water bill to, and then call up the company and ask. I guarantee you that water supplies, water utilities across the country are getting these kinds of questions now, and they should have readily available answers. So it's, I think, important for water utilities for people to stay in touch with their water utility and figure out what's going on and what new research is coming up. They will provide it.
Let's make sure we get this in. What's your Twitter handle?
It's at CaptDocMike, and I'll spell it. It's the @ CaptDocMike. In the beginning, when I got my Twitter account, I was going to write about the fact that my boating and boating that I was doing off the coast and sailing, and so that's where the captain comes from. The doc is, supposedly people call me Doc all the time, although I don't make house calls. So CaptDocMike.
Great. And we're going to have you on in maybe this summer to talk about your new book. Just real quickly, tell us about that book.
Yes, I'll be glad to. Just in February, gosh, why does February seem like 5 years ago?
It does, doesn't it?
Time is moving very slowly. But in the middle of February, the American Waterworks Association published our book called Tucson Water Turnaround, Crisis to Success. My co-author on that is Marie Perthree. Both Marie and I were involved in the recovery from a disastrous corrosion problem in Tucson, Arizona, that occurred 22 years before the problems in Flint, Michigan. Everybody had retired. People were available, willing to talk to us, be interviewed. And so we were able to really get into the root causes of what happened, what caused this massive corrosion problem in their water supply when they changed from groundwater to Colorado River water. So the book investigates what happened, what caused the particular problems, what were the managerial failures, what were the technical failures, but then also the recovery. And that's why it's called Turnaround in the title, because it was turned around from a disastrous public relations problem to a point where they were able to provide Colorado River water without causing any corrosion problems at all, and finally reestablishing credibility with their customers. So it's an interesting story, I think, and I'd be very happy to talk to you about that at a future time.
Great. Well, I'm looking forward to that. So thanks again for coming on today. It's a short notice. I think that there's a real need for information about drinking water and the coronavirus from people who have the kind of background that you have. And so it's much appreciated. Thanks very much for having me, Todd. This has been Talk+Water. My guest today was Dr. Michael J. McGuire, a nationally recognized expert on the treatment of drinking water. My name is Todd Votteler, the host of Talk+Water. Let's talk water again soon.